What's up YouTube, I'm Guy, and today on the channel we're going to be checking out something really cool. As I'm sure you could have guessed based on the title of this video, today I'm reviewing an Oris Aquis Date. Now, like a lot of you guys, I was of course familiar with the brand of Oris, but never really had the opportunity to spend a lot of time with one of their watches to really check it out up close and personally. And now that I have, I'm happy to say that I'm really impressed with this watch and with what the brand Oris is doing. I think they make a really high quality product, and hopefully I can convey both a little bit of information about the brand of Oris and convey my opinions or impressions about this watch with you guys. I'd like to take a moment to thank a local watch dealer in my area that has loaned me this watch for review. Exquisite Timepieces in Naples, Florida is a brick-and-mortar store that has been open for over 20 years. They're an authorized dealer of approximately 50 brands. Some of the most notable ones for me are, of course, Grand Seiko, Omega, Nomos, Blancpain, and of course, Oris. Their website is exquisitetimepieces.com. They do ship worldwide, and if you want to check them out, head over to that website. And if you happen to contact them, speak to Evan and let him know that Guy from the JustBlueFish watch channel referred you. Hopefully, they'll consider loaning me more watches in the future. In the time that I've spent with this watch, I wanted to do a little research about the company and get to know Oris as a whole a little bit better. So let me share a little bit of information about Oris that you might find interesting. I know I did. Oris is a brand with a rich and extensive history that I wasn't aware of. They're a Swiss watch brand founded in 1904 and started making some of their first wristwatches from converted pocket watches in the mid-1920s. By the late 1930s, they had started making their own escapements and created what they called the Big Crown Pilot's watch. By 1952, they had developed their first automatic watch using their in-house caliber 601 movement. In 1965, they created their first dive watch with a unidirectional bezel, 100 meters of water resistance, and of course luminous markers. Since then, there have been a number of innovations in watchmaking leading to the development of the Aquis that we have here on review today. Some of those innovations include new in-house movements, the trademarked red rotor that we'll see on the display case back of this movement. They have a watch with an integrated depth gauge, and they've created the caliber 110 with a 10-day power reserve. Of course, I've been aware of the brand Oris for quite a while now, but their history has largely been unknown to me until doing this research about them. And what I've learned is that it is a brand with a lot of heritage and a lot of history, and I'm really impressed with what I've learned. Hopefully, you guys are also impressed and interested in seeing this Oris Aquis Date up close. Before we jump over to the tabletop, I want to preface this review by saying this is the pre-2017 model of the Oris Aquis Date. In 2017, it went through a little bit of a redesign, or what I would really call a slight refinement. There were some changes to the dial and the handset, most notably the shape of the markers, a little bit of printing on the dial, and the old style that we have here has a leaf style handset. The new style handset is a little bit different. Also, they did slim down the bracelet on the new version, although I was talking to a watch collector buddy of mine and he said he prefers this thicker, chunkier watch to the new one. I haven't really spent any time with the new one, so I can't say one way or the other which I prefer, but I definitely do like what I've seen here on this example. There's also been some other minor improvements to the post-2017 model, including changes to the crown and lugs. One thing to note that is different about these two models: the pre-2017 model came in at an MSRP of $1,850, and the new model that came out post-2017 has an MSRP of $2,000. Also in 2018, they came out with a 39.5mm model, which I think is going to appeal to a lot of people that think that this 43mm model is a little bit too big. Well, I'm going to jump over to the tabletop view. I'm going to show you this watch up close. I'm going to tell you about all of the specs, features, functionality, everything that I normally cover, and then we'll come back over here for my final thoughts. Alright guys, here we have it, the Oris Aquis Date 43mm. First thing we're going to talk about in covering this watch is going to be the overall dimensions. We have a case diameter of right at 43mm, not including the crown or crown guards. The lug width is a little bit of an interesting discussion, and we'll talk about that more when we look at the case and the bracelet more closely. Suffice to say, though, this has somewhat of an integrated bracelet. It's not actually an integrated bracelet, but nevertheless, it has an interesting sizing of the lugs. This inner portion of the lugs that we would normally measure for the lug widths is a very small 12 millimeters, with the overall width of the lugs from outer edge to outer edge coming in at 26 millimeters. Yeah, as you can imagine, you're not going to get many aftermarket straps installed on this watch. Again, we'll cover that more shortly. Thickness on this watch comes in at a very nice, roughly 12.5 millimeters on my caliper, with lug-to-lug widths from one extremity of the case to the other, coming in right at about 50 millimeters. Overall, the way I would describe this watch is a little bit chunky. Despite the fact that it is kind of a beefy watch, it does actually wear really well on my wrist, and I'll try to remember to give you guys a wrist shot here in a little while. But yeah, despite the fact that it is big, and part of the reason that it feels kind of chunky or hefty is also in the bracelet, which I'll show you in a few minutes. I don't really find it to be overwhelmingly large. Would I prefer maybe that new 2018 model in 39.5 millimeters? I suspect I might, but I do like what this watch has going on. Some of the other features about this watch: a really nice satiny finished ceramic bezel. It's not a super high gloss bezel. It has a great brushed or satin style finish on it. We have a great dome sapphire crystal, and it does have AR coating on the underside. The case back is a display or exhibition case back. We have a black matte dial with applied markers and a leaf style handset. The handset and the markers are both filled with BGW9 Superluminova. I'll give you an example of the glow-in-the-dark luminescence here in a little bit. Of course, we get the typical screw-down crown like you would expect on a dive watch, 300-meter water resist, and obviously this does come on a stainless steel bracelet. Probably the first thing I want to talk about is the movement, and we'll take a look at that display case back as well since we're talking about the movement. This watch uses what Oris calls the caliber 733, as we can, it's difficult to get a good picture with the bracelet here, but get the balance wheel spinning in frame as well. The caliber 733 is effectively a Swiss Sellita SW200-1 movement. It's a nice movement, 26 joules, runs at a rate of 28,800 vibrations per hour, and it has a 38-hour power reserve. The Sellita movement is considered to be a really good movement, actually. It's a clone of the ETA 2824-2, and with some refinements, a lot of people consider it to be an even better movement than that ETA movement than that it's based off of. Now, this isn't a COSC certified movement. It doesn't go through an extensive amount of regulation that I'm aware of. That said, on my wrist, it does keep really good time. As a quick example, my Rolex Submariner on the left. I set both of these watches at the exact same time yesterday, and after 24 hours, the Oris with the Sellita or caliber 733 movement is maybe 4 seconds faster than my Rolex, and my Rolex is exceptionally accurate. My Rolex is gaining or losing less than a fraction of a second per day. So I would say that this Oris is probably somewhere in the ballpark of +4 or +5 seconds per day. Of course, this is just a single example. You know, I don't, again, think that these movements are highly regulated from the factory, but impressive nonetheless that this particular example, especially an older pre-owned example that probably, to my knowledge, doesn't have any service history, is still keeping excellent accurate time. The overall finishing of this Oris Aquis Date is outstanding. Of course, this is a pre-owned watch, and as you can see, there's a little bit of wear on it, but overall it's in outstanding condition considering that it's probably several years old. The sides of the case are finished with a very nice satiny smooth brushed finish, with the tops of the lugs having a very nice mirrored polish. That mirrored polishing runs down onto the edge links of the bracelet as well. Overall, the aesthetic is really outstanding. On the left-hand side of the case, we have the crown, and we have these integrated crown guards, which are interesting, something that I haven't really seen before. It appears as though they are screwed into the case with these sort of Y-shaped style screws. In the event that this needed to be removed or serviced, I'm sure none of us would have this tool. Nevertheless, though, I don't think it's a problem. The screw-down crown is high polished, and it is signed with the name Oris on it. The crown itself, screwing and unscrewing it, the action is absolutely perfect. I have no complaints whatsoever there. Getting it out to that first position does, of course, give us hand winding, and it has a very nice, smooth hand wind action. Pulling the crown out to the first position allows us to quick set the date. It does have a date complication down at the 6 o'clock side of the dial. And of course, pulling the crown out to the second position hacks the movement and allows us to set the time. Very standard stuff. Pushing it back in with a little bit of downward pressure allows us to screw that crown back down, snug it to the case, and re-achieve that 300 meters of water resist. The bezel assembly and the bezel insert are exceptionally well done. There's a very nice textured or knurling on the edge of the bezel, which makes this 120 click unidirectional bezel very smooth and easy to actuate. You don't have to apply any overt downward pressure, just simply spin the bezel to the desired timekeeping position. In this case, we could set it down at the current minutes hand here and track our elapsed time. The bezel insert is, as I had mentioned briefly earlier, a ceramic insert, but it has basically a satin or brushed finish, so it's not offensively shiny or glossy, if you will. I really actually like the finish on this bezel. It looks great. It does reflect a little bit of light, as we can see in my studio here, but it's not like a blinding amount of reflection. It's not like the Rolex Submariner's bezel that always looks kind of wet because it's so glossy. I really like the implementation of this bezel. All of the graduations or markers are filled with, I assume, just a white paint, but they are engraved ever so slightly below the surface of the bezel. I'll try to bring in a nice close shot here if we can see how deep that engraving is. I'm not sure if it'll show up too well on the camera, but nevertheless, there's a nice close-up of that bezel. And the bezel insert, that ceramic insert, I really do like it. I think that I probably prefer this satiny brushed finish as opposed to a high gloss finish on a bezel. It's really well done. Of course, up at the 12 o'clock side, we have a luminous pip or pearl, as you would expect on an elapsed time bezel. It works good. And speaking of that pearl, we'll move on to the dial. And the first thing I want to talk about is the lume on the dial and the handset, including that luminous pearl up at the 0 marker on the bezel. As previously mentioned, the lume on this watch uses BGW9 Superluminova. It's a very nice coloration. It's bright enough, but not overwhelming, and it is pretty long lasting. Overall, it's about what you would expect. Not as bright or blinding as something you might see on like a Seiko Monster. You can almost use a watch like that as a flashlight. But certainly adequate lume, and it looks good. It's generously applied to the handset and markers. No complaints with the lume on this watch. In talking about the dial and the handset, I really do like this dial. Number one, it's a very nice matte dial. I'll try to zoom in here really closely so that you can sort of see that there's a grain or texture to that dial. That looks really good, although not really visible to the naked eye. You can definitely see it when you're looking close or through some magnification. This black matte dial, it almost presents a little gray if you're in the right light. But it's mostly black. I mean, at arm's length in normal lighting situations, it looks black. And again, there's this nice sort of sandy grain to it. Overall, a great presentation. Oris underscored by the word automatic at the 12 o'clock side, pressure resistant, 30 bar, 300 meters down at the 6 o'clock side. We also have the date complication there at the 6 o'clock side with Swiss made. I really like when a watchmaker puts the date down at the 6 o'clock side as opposed to the 3 o'clock. It sort of balances out the symmetry of the dial a little bit better. As you can see, that 6 o'clock applied marker is sort of abbreviated to make room for this date window. And the date window is sort of beveled or faceted downward into the dial so as to create a little bit of a frame. At the outer edge of this dial, you can see we have a very simple printed seconds or minutes track which surrounds each of the stainless steel applied markers. Those markers are, of course, filled with Superluminova. The 12 o'clock marker is slightly embellished or oversized in comparison to the rest of the markers, probably to aid in orientation and finding the 12 o'clock position in low light. The handset is a leaf-style handset in stainless steel. The second hand does have a luminous lollipop pip out towards the end. The hour hand has a separation or is sort of segregated and has two lume-filled portions, while the minute hand is completely lume-filled. Again, another tool in helping you figure out your orientation in low light. These leaf-style hands, probably not my favorite style of hand, and looking at the new version, the post-2018 updated version, I think I prefer the styling of that handset a little bit better. These certainly aren't bad though. When I compare the two, I do prefer that. The next thing I want to talk about is this bracelet, and if we look at the profile of the bracelet, in particular the links, you can see that this is, again, a really chunky watch, and especially the bracelet is what makes it feel so hefty. On that new updated or refined version, I believe they slimmed down the profile of these links to make the watch a little less hefty, if you will. I have talked to some people that say that they prefer the heft that you find on this watch, and in particular the bracelet. I do like it. Without having a lot of experience with the new one, I can't say which I prefer. But again, I would not turn this watch down for any reason. The overall finish or aesthetic of the links on the bracelet are polished on the ends, brushed on the center. Overall, very well done. Even on this pre-owned model, it's holding up quite well. I think a lot of people have voiced the opinion on a watch like the Rolex GMT with the polished center links that it's a scratch magnet, and they dislike that. Overall, I'm not seeing much wear or tear here, and given the way that I care for my watches, I don't think that I would have a problem with the polished on the edges of these links here. I think it's a really attractive presentation, and it looks good to me. The clasp is, of course, a very relatively simple clasp, signed Oris, brushed over the entirety of the clasp. It has dual button deployance. Deploying that clasp opens it up to a nice, robust machined swing arm. The blades are really well done. There's a little bit of information on that blade there, the Oris brand, stainless steel. The clasp itself is not really a letdown per se. It's good quality. It's definitely thick and robust. You have a few micro adjustments, and of course, if you fold down the last link here, it does open up to a diver's extension. I do think at about a $2,000 price point, though, I would prefer if it had some sort of toolless adjustment like we see on, more high-end watches, but it's starting to get implemented even to watches in this sort of mid-range as well. As a matter of fact, one watch I reviewed in the past, which was on a rubber strap, that's the word I'm looking for, it did have a toolless adjustable a clasp as well. That was a Breitling Avenger, if I'm not mistaken. Again, I'd like to see some sort of toolless adjustment here. That would be my preference, but overall it's a pretty well done clasp. Now, in talking about this bracelet, I had mentioned the lugs on the case and how they're a little strange and how they decided to design this. That center portion between the lug is again only 12 millimeters. So basically your options are to use this bracelet, one of the rubber straps that Oris puts their watches on, or potentially some aftermarket options out there for specifically the Oris Aquis. Other than that, you're really not going to be able to install NATO straps or anything like that. That's going to be a letdown for a lot of you guys, I'm sure, that like to switch their watches out. However, this is such a nicely made bracelet that I wouldn't really have a problem with that. I would most certainly keep this on the bracelet pretty much 100% of the time anyway. The flexibility of the bracelet is really great because each link is independent. So as you can see, that center link there is completely independent from each other link. And what that means is that this watch just drapes on the wrist. It lays very, very flat. It's extremely articulated, I guess is how I would describe it. Overall, very comfortable and very well done. There's not any sort of squeakiness or grinding, you know what I mean, when you see in a lesser quality bracelet. Really, really well done, very well implemented. It does use screws. They're teeny tiny little screws. I don't know what size they are. There they are. I don't know if my camera's picking it up very well, but yeah, absolutely tiny little screws. So I think it's smaller than the typical 1.6 millimeter flathead that you might find on like a Rolex style oyster bracelet. I don't have a screwdriver that would fit them, so I wasn't able to resize this at all. Fortunately, it actually fits my wrist fairly well, which reminds me I should probably go ahead and do a wrist shot for you guys. A lot of you guys complain because I forget to do wrist shots. Truth be told, I'm not really the type of person that holds a lot of value in seeing a wrist shot from other people's reviews. I don't know, it doesn't mean a lot to me, but I know a lot of people ask for it, so I'll go ahead and throw this on the wrist for you real quick. Alright guys, there's the Oris Aquis 43 millimeter on my 6 3/4, roughly 6 3/4 inch wrist. Certainly fits me well, not overwhelming. Those downward sloping lugs basically makes this watch feel though as if it's not trying to test the outer limits of my wrist at all. It's actually a really great fit, and it's very comfortable. It's a little heavier than the average dive watch that I've reviewed in the past or that I've owned, but it certainly doesn't feel fatiguing. I don't think I'd have a problem with it over an extended period of time. Very, very comfortable because of how extremely well articulated that bracelet is, the clasp also really well done, with the exception of my desire to see toolless adjustment there. But in the case of this particular watch, it's sized and fits me perfectly, and there is a few micro adjustment holes if they were needed. So yeah, there you go. There's your 20-second long wrist shot. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Overall, very impressed with this watch. Very happy to have had the opportunity to check it out. It's my first time really spending any time with any Oris watch, and I think having an Aquis is probably the best first watch for me to have brought from the brand to review on my YouTube channel. I hope you guys have enjoyed this presentation. I'm going to jump back over to the studio view with my final thoughts, so stick with me for a few more minutes. So what are my final thoughts of the Oris Aquis Date, in particular this pre-2017 model? Let's talk about value a little bit here first. This model did release at $1,850, but since they don't probably make it anymore, and I'm not 100% sure, I would assume they don't make it anymore, but it is still showing up on their website. Regardless, you can find these for a steal now, in great condition at $1,000. I've seen them selling for even less than that. If I was going to purchase one of these, would I hold out for one of the new models at a $2,000 MSRP with the minor refinements that we have seen in the dial and the handset in the bracelet, or would I save a bundle of money and go with one of these pre-2017 pre-owned models? It's tough to say because I haven't spent any significant time with the newer ones, but I will say that I do really like this watch, and I would most certainly jump on one if I saw a deal and I was interested in owning it. As I've alluded to in the tabletop portion of this review, the quality here is absolutely outstanding. Something that I'm really impressed with is that caliber 733 movement that they're using here, which is of course a Sellita SW200-1. The accuracy that I'm getting out of this watch over the past few days has been great. It seems like a very good movement, and I've heard a lot of really good things about it. All of the other features that they've integrated into this watch, like the ceramic bezel, the anti-reflective coated sapphire crystal, the great bracelet, everything is really put together. The fit and finish is really well done. And yeah, quality here, definitely top notch. I'd really love to see one of those new 2017 models, or probably the 39.5mm 2018 model with that beautiful sunburst blue dial. I think that if I had the opportunity to hold one of those in my hands, or really to spend a little bit of time with it, I bet that would be the one that would attract me to the Aquis Date the most. But I do really like this watch. Hopefully you guys really liked checking it out with me. I appreciate you tuning in. I want to thank you guys for checking out this video. As always, if you want to help support the channel, there's a few things you can do. First things first, if you're interested in a watch like this, or any of the watches that Exquisite Timepieces sells as an authorized dealer or from their pre-owned inventory, go over to exquisitetimepieces.com, and if you happen to speak to Evan over there, tell them that you heard about their business from me. Again, they're not giving me anything to produce this video or to promote them. They were kind enough to loan me a watch, and I hope they'll continue to do it in the future. Other ways that you can help support the channel, down in the description of this video, are links to my social media accounts. If you guys would follow me over on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, I would really appreciate it. Also, if you'd like to support me on Patreon, I could always use more help over there. Finally, whenever I review something, I usually put links to it down in the description of this video that go through my Amazon affiliate account. If you want to buy something that I've reviewed, or anything else for that matter, and you click on my Amazon affiliate link, I get a small commission, and that really does add up. It does help me out. Alright guys, thanks for checking out this video again. I will see you later this week with another review. Bye now.